In this lesson, we'll talk about the subdivision workflow that we'll be using as we work in Mudbox. So if you're a subscriber, this lesson file is lesson 04 start. Otherwise, you can just go to create, mesh, and bring in a cube if you want to follow along. And so if we take a look at this cube, we can see we've got the wireframe turned on here. And so we can see that this cube is made up of 4 quad pieces of geometry, and that, but when I say quad, I just mean 4-sided piece of geometry. So each one of these faces has 4 sides, and there's 4 of these per face. So that gives us a total of 24 faces, which we can see here in our object list. Now right now, we simply have 24 faces. We don't have any additional levels, okay? So right here you can see the level set to 1. It just means we've got one base piece of geometry here, but we don't have any subdivision levels. You can see that information echoed down here at the bottom. Okay, and so to be able to start to sculpt on our model and create a high resolution model, we need to subdivide it. And so the way Mudbox is going to subdivide our mesh is very similar to the way that other applications are going to utilize a subdivision or smoothing algorithm to go ahead and calculate this. So each one of these quad faces is going to be subdivided into 4 faces. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So if we go up to mesh, you can see we have options here for adding a new subdivision level and then stepping through those levels. Okay, you can see the hotkey for this is Shift D, but we'll go ahead and click this the first time. And you can see as we click this, we get level 1, and then we get a new polygon count. Here in our objects list, you can see we now have a new level with a new number of faces, and we can see visually in here not only has it added more faces, so each one of those quad pieces of geometry, each one of those squares has gotten subdivided, but not only that, it's also gotten smoothed. Okay, if we go ahead and do that again by hitting Shift D once again, we add a new subdivision level, and then each one of those polygons gets smoothed further. And so you can see we can really start to get a very smooth surface. Okay, you can see here that I now have the base level and then 1, 2, 3 levels. Now at any time I can modify this geometry, let's say. So if I want to move something here at this level, I can move it. I can also move up and down the levels. So if I go to mesh, you can see I have options for step level up and step level down. We also have page up and page down as the hotkey. So if I hit page down, you can see that I'm now at level 2, the number of polygons now at level 1, and now at the base level. And you can see the changes that I made at that higher level are reflected here on the lower level. So you're going to find that the changes you make on whatever level you're at are going to affect the other levels. So if you've got a lot of high resolution detail and then you go back down to the lowest level and start moving things around and go back up, that's going to be reflected in the higher levels. Okay, going page up will take us back up the levels. Okay, so the workflow is going to be to take your low resolution piece of geometry and come in and start to move up and down the levels, adding levels as needed and doing sculpting. If you find you get to a level and you really want to add some detail in here and you just can't add it because there's not enough resolution, you can add a new subdivision level, and that'll subdivide those polygons even further so that you can get that high resolution detail in there. Now you notice that when we subdivide these, it's actually smoothing it at the same time, and that's the default behavior here. But if I go ahead and bring in another cube, okay, and I'll go ahead and turn that one off. Let's take this back down, the new cube back down to the lower levels here. Okay, if we want to get rid of subdivision levels, we can delete the highest level. So right now, I can go ahead and start to delete that until I get down to just the base. Finally, it's going to tell us I can't remove the active level, so we've gotten rid of everything. There are options in our Add New Subdivision level here. If we go into the options, you can see that Smooth Positions by default is turned on. We also have an option for subdividing and smoothing UVs. If I turn off Smooth Positions, it's still going to subdivide it, but it's not going to smooth it anymore. So if I hit Shift D, okay, and go ahead and hit that, it's going to actually subdivide it. And you can see that subdivision here. It's a little bit hard to see as far as the wireframe goes, but you can see that it has subdivided. It just hasn't smoothed it out. Okay, so we could go ahead and add several levels here, and you can see that even though it's adding those levels, it's not smoothing them out. Okay, now by default, that smooth positions this on, because typically that's what we'll want to do. We'll actually want to smooth that geometry out, but there may be instances where you don't want that to happen, and so you can utilize that. Okay, and again, you can go up and down your subdivision levels as much as you want. Okay, now we started with a cube here, but if you take a look at this sort of low resolution creature here, take a look at it. You can see it's a very simple shape. If we look at the wireframe, and so created this in another application just through some simple modeling techniques, extrusion, adding edge loops, and so forth. Very simple shape. And so through the process of progressively subdividing this shape, we're able to add more detail as we go. So if we go up to, let's say, the next level here, we can start to add a little bit more shape on the silhouette, start to add a little bit of shape to the neck in there. Okay, as we move up to level 2, you can see start to see a little bit more of that shape come out, more of the wrinkling and the bumpiness of the flesh and the skin and underneath the neck. Okay, and then as we move up to level 3, you can start to see a little bit more of that. And so there are different workflows for working in subdivision levels. Some people will work up through the levels. So, go to a particular level, do as much as you can at that particular level, and then go to the next one. Some people will go, all the way up to a very high level and do some sculpting and adding mass and cutting stuff away and doing it that way. So as you go through the process, you'll find the workflow that works best for you. You can see some of that detail starting to come through here again as we go up another subdivision level. You'll be able to see that detail come out. So now we're here at the highest level. If we turn off our wireframe, you can see that we have a lot of those wrinkles added underneath here. And there's still a lot of detail that you could go in and add. But getting this kind of detail from what we saw was a very low resolution mesh makes for a really powerful and really fun way to work and way to create your character. So you can start with something as low resolution and simple as the mesh that we just saw, and get something that has a lot of detail, even more detail than what this has. All right, so that's kind of the way that subdivision is going to work here. Remember that you can add your new subdivision levels with Shift D, and then you use page up and down to move up and down those levels. If you need to delete the highest level, you can do that to get back down to your lower levels. And remember that the work that you do on the levels affects the other levels and what those are going to actually look like. Okay. All right, so that's kind of the basics of the subdivision workflow. Next, let's take a look at some of the basics of sculpting. So we'll look at some of the sculpt tools and how to work with some of the sculpting properties and fall-offs to get the look that we're going for. So we'll take a look at sculpting in the next lesson.